This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Welcome, everybody. You are tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw. We discuss the hot button topics of the NBA, and this is Saving the Last Dance. My man Shaw and I doing our post wrap-up discussion of episodes 3 and 4 of Saving the Last Dance. Mr. Shaw, what is good, brother?
I'm doing great, man. These episodes give me life, fam. They do. They give me life. I just sit there giddy with a smile as I'm watching these. It gives you nothing but jokes, new memes, new material here for 2020, man. Saving the Last Dance or The Last Dance is just providing all the content we need in a basketball star society right now, bro.
Yeah, it kind of makes me smile inside because it really helps. It almost, let me not be disrespectful, but I feel like I want to be disrespectful. You know, to all of the people in the 2000s, man, like sometimes it just makes you want to put a middle finger up to everybody who really just had no understanding, no true pure respect for the things that these guys went through during the late 80s and into the 90s when it came to playing the game of basketball, right? And I think maybe in a way, Shaw, that's part of the reason why a little bit of, you know, my appreciation for the game somewhat dissipated. You know what I'm saying? Because of the way things have happened. Now, I'm not trying to diss players in the 2000s or anything like that. I think what I'm saying is that the entertainment realm of the NBA has gotten so much, like it's consumed so much that we've forgotten about the inner workings of what made the actual machine of this NBA go. And then when you see docuseries like this take place, it reminds you very vividly. There's some talking points that I know we're going to get through for our show and stuff. But one of the things that I think I just want to make sure I highlight before we don't get a chance to do it is, you know, rewatching some of the footage of the conference finals and the playoff games that took place were magical to me, man. There was a pageantry about the NBA at that time in the late 80s and the 90s is just unbridled. And you can even go back as far as the early 80s as well, too, because that was the dawning of Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, you know, after they have picked, you know, they picked the torch from Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. But there's just a pageantry that I just think doesn't get appreciated too much. I mean, I know we're in this high technological advancement of how the game needs to be profiled and displayed, but there was a pureness about seeing fans go crazy when the Bulls played the Pistons. There was something that you know that if you weren't there, you couldn't appreciate it. It didn't matter if you were there at the arena, even on the television sets. You know what I'm saying? There was just a simplicity, raw feel that it meant something, and it wasn't AI induced, right? Like sports broadcasting has such an influence now on how we display the game and the way that it's being portrayed and how we profile the players. All of that really, the players helped profile the game a whole lot more back then than what we see right now.
Well, I mean, it's very much in the nicest way possible, like a kind of get off my lawn, you know, soliloquy there, I think, in that aspect, because we always hear about how the late 80s and the 90s were a golden age for the basketball. And people who grew up in that time and understand that time in the sense that kind of that we do, and we're blessed to really have seen that time and to be able to compare it to now. It's very easy to just remember how just amazing it was back then. And you're hearing everybody's watching this and you're seeing how physical the play was and how rivalries were truly there. You didn't really have the AAU generation where everyone was friends and things of that nature. I mean, there's a part of this, which we'll get to obviously, but that hatred between the bad boys and the Bulls still runs deep, you know, real deep. It's again, beef is everlasting there. And I think that's something that we don't have in today's NBA. And, you know, I think it's cool that, you know, we get to relive this a little bit now with The Last Dance and seeing some of that stuff. And as you alluded to, the pageantry that was in the late 80s, early 90s and late 80s, late 90s.
And I also have to give a shout to the people, you know, the director, Hire and his team. They they basically had their DJ Vlad moments, when they were showing Jordan the feedback of Jordan talking about the incident with Rodman, and then replaying the Eastern Conference Finals when the Bulls basically lambasted the Pistons, and how Isiah came up with that lame ass excuse about, they all did, like we all did it. It wasn't like it just came out of nowhere. Had I known, we'd have gone and shaken their hands and things of that nature. Remember when the Celtics did that to us, and they weren't making a big deal of it, but we did it, and all of a sudden we're disgracing the NBA. And I mean, that was just like pure DJ Vlad, when you just silence out the real microphones and just hear the producer in the back say, "Oh, did you see what Isiah said about this incident? This was his version." And Jordan is basically like, "We get that shit out of here." You know what I'm saying? Like that just, again, yeah, like, and again, I can appreciate that this docuseries is just laying it all out. Like, there's no fluff, there's no, B-roll, of, okay, here's some additional footage that may have really revealed stuff that they didn't want to put into this. This is, and I appreciate the fact that all of them are giving their true emotions to this. Even Phil Jackson, who's pretty much emotionless. You know what I'm saying? I mean, he's more Gandhi than everybody so far that's been involved in this situation. So who knows what happens, like where he flips the script at some point, because I refuse to believe that Phil Jackson was this tempered going through this whole particular process. And it'll be interesting when they get further down into the series about how Phil Jackson really felt about Krause and the way that the Bulls organization treated him in that renegotiating of him coming back for that final season. So listen, we got a ton of stuff to get into. And in no short order, we're going to try to get through as much of it as we can. As always, be sure to get our man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA, or get at me at GameFace Lee. The show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline. And again, the show is called the Baseline NBA Podcast. Every single week, you can catch us on all your major platforms. Just look for the Baseline NBA Podcast. We're also featured on Dash Radio every Tuesday, 1 p.m., the Baseline NBA Show. So you can't miss us. We're all over the place. All right, so let's get right into it, man. We're going to try and highlight as many of what we consider are the important things that we took from these next two episodes. One in particular, Rodman's story, which obviously we all were waiting for that to come at least out in the light, right? So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the Phil story, how Phil got his hands into the Chicago Bulls, or more so was led by Jerry Krause to the Chicago Bulls. The Doug Collins impact. And I think that it cannot be missed that if we're talking about Phil Jackson, we have to talk about what happened with Doug Collins and obviously the Bad Boys. So let's get right into it. The Rodman story angle, Sean. And hey, I'm glad that they finally just let Rodman have his 5 minutes, right? Like this piecemealing of Dennis Rodman, trying to figure out, is this fluff? Is this, I'm just glad that he was given a little bit of a space here for him to say how he really feels. No matter how off the deep end he may come off sometimes, there is a true genuineness. And this is why he is considered one of the greatest defenders, greatest rebounders in the game. He had to believe that he was the best person on the court for what he wanted to do. Not necessarily for what everybody wanted him to do, but for what he wanted to do. And he got a chance to articulate that, and I'm glad that he did. And he also highlighted everything that we felt, that this man was a ticking time bomb. And unless handled gently, or maybe like Jordan, like a big father that he never had, he had to come and spank his ass a couple of times to put him in check. And that was, to me, very interesting to see that come out of light in this particular series.
Yeah, I love the fact that they really touched on Dennis the way they did. There's one thing about it that sticks out to me a little bit, even maybe more so than maybe people are thinking about. Rodman in today's era, being as eccentric and authentic as he is, he'd probably be more widely accepted.
He'd be the most popular player in the NBA. Yeah.
We fully accept, peak guys who wear makeup and want to dress flamboyantly and do whatever the case may be very much now. He was a rock star back then, and I forgot he dated Madonna, honestly. And
he was the NBA's Madonna. Yeah, exactly.
Dated Carmen Electra and the whole nine. But he came from humble upbringings, and the part, you know, him saying living on the street for 2 years, and then working his way and finding basketball and coming to college and all of that, and how he studied the game, fam. Like, he studied the art of rebounding, and there's not too many people
That
who
was
want to
impressive.
go to those levels in length to be, in essence, an elite role player. He was Mr. Intangible. Like, Gary Payton called him the F up person. He's going to come here and F up your entire scheme because of the homework he's done. He studied it. And I think in that way, that's the genius that Rodman was back in this time. Like, he knew what it meant to play his damn role, and he played it expertly, rebounding and defense, you know, and just being a helpful enforcer and being a team first guy. But yeah, he had his own demons that he had to battle as well too, emotionally. And there are some things that come out in this documentary, some stuff that we know as well from before. But I just love taking a look at the Worm, bro, and just hearing some of the players and their comments about what Rodman did and how he did it. I think was epic. And I keep hardening back to, suppose you're 19 years old right now and you're seeing Dennis Rodman for the first time in this. You're like, who is this dude? What was going on back then? Your mind has to be blown.
YouTube sensation. Yeah. Back then, we would have been like, oh no, that just can't fly. Not in my hood. That can't fly. And that's not even questioning the masculinity of Dennis Rodman. What I'm saying is that Dennis Rodman even when you showed him, he didn't represent like he ever felt like he fit in. You know what I'm saying? He really felt like someone who was trying to go through whatever he had to go through to finally find, you know, a skin that where he felt comfortable. And it's interesting that he gravitated to Madonna, because you can even make the argument that Madonna was in that same space as well too, because she was a pop star, but even she had admitted to the fact that she could not accept that role of wanting to be this all famous, and all of them go through this. I mean, you know, our generation's Madonna is this generation's Lady Gaga. You know what I'm saying? So they all go through it. And I thought it was just interesting. Now, I will say this, and I give Madonna props on this front. She told him, hey, don't let everybody define you. Be comfortable in your own skin. You define yourself. And so at first, you know, and this is where I think where he got, like, you know, the way that he felt was, you know, the media, obviously, I'm so sick of you guys because you are always trying to write my script for me rather than listening to what I'm saying and hearing me and understanding me. I think that authentically helped reflect a separation in how athletes wanted to be portrayed, because the way that you believe that the athlete was controlling the narrative, you copied Michael Jordan, you copied Magic Johnson, you copied Isiah Thomas. If you weren't those dudes, you were beneath them. There was a hierarchy in the NBA being created already before Dennis Rodman became as eccentric as he did. And then once he went it and took it to the extreme, I mean, he literally shattered the ceiling, right? Like, he completely made this a jaded league, so much so that a guy like Allen Iverson can crawl in and put a space where hip-hop influences the NBA. Besides that, it was the squalors and the NBA elites. And Jordan has always wanted to be an NBA elite. And maybe in some respects, Jordan wanted to at least find some kind of balance to keep Rodman from teetering over the line, where he knew that even Rodman knew he would never be able to get in Jordan's club, right? And so we're going to talk about that in a little bit as well too. But I just want to go back real quick. To me, what highlighted that Rodman period, the cigar incident, right? Where Michael Jordan and Dennis Rodman, this is where they're having their quote unquote coming to Jesus moment, right? Where Dennis Rodman gets kicked out of a game. This is during that period that Scottie Pippen is on the mend and is basically saying, I don't want to come play for this team. And Jordan is like, I need my Pippen right now. And Dennis Rodman is doing Dennis Rodman-ish, and he gets kicked out the game. And Jordan is like, I don't even want to deal with you right now. I'm so, like, pissed with you. And Rodman knows that and respects him enough that he comes to the hotel, Jordan's hotel room that night, and he asks for the cigar, right? And Jordan is like, that's when I knew, right? that to me also highlights a moment that I know that you and me will never be there, right? But there is always a code in the game. There is a symbolic code in the game. And that to me, that was the definitive moment of Michael Jordan getting Rodman to be his Pippen for the period that he needed them to be for the Bulls to get over this funk of mediocrity they had been in.
So one of the things I'll say to complement that in some ways is something that Chuck Daly said, or was quoted as saying in the docuseries, that you don't put a saddle on a Mustang. And I think Rodman put saddles on himself when it was appropriate to help the team and to rein himself back in when he could. But we all know he struggled, with depression and some emotional distress and things of that nature. But when it came to the basketball, he knew when to put the saddle on himself as the Mustang and to rein himself in a little bit. And I think with that moment, he did just that. He just said, you know what, I'm in the wrong here and I've got to help my team. Let me go to MJ and get my proverbial ish together here. A couple of things I want to highlight before we move off of Rodman as well too. Shouts to Jim Stack, I guess assistant GM, largely responsible for getting him from San Antonio over to Chicago. I think Jerry Krause was very skeptical at the time with the Bulls' structure. They were ironically
you're being nice by saying skeptical. You're being nice between being skeptical.
It's funny that you talk about the Bulls' structure.
He's like, I don't want that nonsense on my team.
Well, and Krause, who could blame him, at the time, especially in the very conservative times back then. But it's funny to me, you're talking about the Bulls structure, and then San Antonio is known for probably the most well-structured places in the NBA currently, but they weren't quite there yet when they had Dennis on the team, and they brought him over to Chicago, and that's because Jordan and Pippen ended up getting him right. But one of the things, this Dennis thing, we'd be remiss if we don't talk about it, obviously, is this trip to Vegas, taking a vacation, middle of the damn season, 48 hours, air quotes. And
wait. I got to throw this in there, Shaw. I got to throw this in there before we move on to the next part of the next subject. Donovan Mitchell's tweet.
Yeah.
He says, say what you want, but Dennis Rodman invented load management. And the Vegas incident is indicative of that truth.
And then you have Carmen Electra. I know she's a star, celebrity in her own right, but at the time, people would call her.
At that time, I was disappointed it was only 48 hours if you're going to stay with Carmen Electra.
Carmen's got what Carmen's got going on at the same time. She's hiding in a bedroom, hiding in covers because MJ is knocking at the door. You know what I mean? Like he's the warden or somebody's daddy. It's wild, It's just really wild to me, but it's crazy that could happen in that time. The Bulls let him ride out and go to Vegas because Phil Jackson basically understood his player and what needed to be done to kind of keep that whole situation from exploding and imploding and them not ultimately being able to win another championship.
But again, Jordan, he's like, Phil, you let him go. That dude ain't coming back.
And he knew. And he wasn't wrong.
Yeah, and he had to go come get him.
He did, like his daddy,
like The Hangover, Part 3. All right, you're tuned to The Baseline. Callie, Warren, Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, and this is Saving the Last Dance as we go through our post-discussion of episodes 3 and 4 of The Last Dance, the Bulls' final three-peat run. All right, let's talk about the Phil story and him coming of age. Listen, again, I say this, for a lot of people who, listen, Greg Popovich, arguably, hands down, greatest coach of all time. But when you see, again, a story like what we're seeing from this docuseries about Phil Jackson's not just upbringings, but his investment in being the coach that he was, learning the game, you have to start saying to yourself, I'm like, are we minimizing his greatness because it's only assumed that he worked with superstars? Or when you see this, this to me tells me a lot about the nuances of understanding and remembering and, philosophically instilling in players, certain roles and stuff. I see the way that Phil Jackson came up in this system. It just, again, it starts to, get that talk bubbling one more time about why do we just completely are disillusioned to not believe that he should always be in a conversation of being one of the greatest NBA head coaches ever. Like, it's just ludicrous to me when I see something like what we're seeing in the docuseries, and then you're saying, oh, he only did it because Jordan was just that great. Oh, he only did it because Shaq and Kobe were that great. I don't know, man.
At the end of the day, I don't think it matters what anybody else says, really and truly, because those same players, Jordan, Pippen, Shaq, Kobe, RIP, when he was alive, they all credit Phil. So they themselves are the ones saying that they couldn't have done it without Phil. So people who want to kind of basically, for lack of a phrase, shit on his narrative as a result of saying, well, he coached all these great guys, those great players themselves admit to not being able to get over the hump had Phil Jackson not entered the fold. So that, to me, is argument done. You know what I mean? If those players are the ones saying it, they're not saying, oh, somebody else could have came here and did it for us. They said it was Phil. So to me, it's a moot point. And this is a guy who earned his stripes. Like, listen, if you didn't know much about Phil coming into this, learning here that he was coaching in the doldrums, if you will, of the Puerto Rican basketball league. And, we have, the mayor or the governors cutting chickens and spilling chicken bloods over the benches. Like, what kind of issues that to deal with and have to work through? So to me, I think Phil Jackson definitely earned his stripes. And, the one thing, and I'm jumping around here a little bit, but he goes from Puerto Rico, goes to the CBA in Albany after obviously playing in the NBA for a while and winning 2 championships with the Knicks. And then gets the eye of Jerry Krause. So again, Krause was a great talent evaluator in a lot of ways, and eventually got him to the Chicago Bulls after a failed interview, but then convinced him to come back a second time and got him under Doug Collins too. But one more thing before I let you jump in with Phil, the story of Phil Jackson and all his greatness, no matter what, cannot be told without Tex Winter. Like, just how Jordan had Pippen and Shaq had Kobe. Phil had Tex, and Tex Winters Triangle Offense it was legendary in its time, and it changed the game, and it really truly helped the Bulls become the Bulls as a result of that, and Jordan even accepting of the Triangle Offense at some point.
Well, and I'm just going to say this part with reference to what you're saying about Tex Winters and Phil Jackson. You have to give credit to Phil Jackson, because it's one thing when you're out, but it's also another thing to know that in accepting that position, you are taking a chance that you can instill those principles into grown men, especially one who is already an all-star, who is already a winning basketball player, right? Like, you're coming into that situation, and we're going to talk about the Doug Collins impact as well. But you're coming into a situation where you have to convince the team that has already been to the Eastern Conference Finals that you are the missing link, and that this system that you're playing in is the missing link to getting you to a championship. Mm-hmm. And the timing has to be perfect, right? And then also, by the other side of it, you might wind up having to play a Magic Johnson-led Los Angeles Lakers team, right, to do it at some point. Like, I'm just saying that, like, you there's a lot that has to be in motion, but there also has to be a philosophical and mental focus that has to be right there. And you have to fervently believe, hey, I'm going to be able to get this out of these guys, and I'm going to get them to that next level, not because Doug Collins couldn't do it, just because I know that I can do it. And that, to me, says a lot. It speaks volumes in that scope, in that narrow inference is how I think people really should be able to extrapolate the understanding of Phil Jackson and why at home there is greatness that is emanating in that period of time frame.
So Phil understood, that he himself was maybe to a lesser extent, the Dennis Rodman of coaching. He was an acquired taste, to say the very least, in his thought process and the things he tried to have the Bulls, not try, but what he had the Bulls actually do. Yoga and Zen and the whole nine, and giving them books to read and things of that nature. And that was important. But even how he got the job, I think in some ways is obviously it's a little shady. There's no.
Oh, you mean when Doug Collins said, "Oh, I had a feeling that Phil was going to be the coach."
So because
and in that Vlad moment, what do you mean? Did you hear something? No, I'm just saying. I just had a feeling.
Because Tex Winter was on the squad and trying to instill that triangle offense, and Collins was like, "F that, give it to Mike and get the F out the way." He didn't want to hear anything else. So right. They show Texas kind of like in this auxiliary role where he's not really feeling loved and appreciated. And Krause goes to Phil and say, "Hey, well, go over there and warm up and cozy up to Tex Winter and see where this goes." And as that relationship started to build, that started to give Krause the inclination that Phil and Tex could eventually replace Doug Collins. But one thing about Collins here, man, is, hey, he helped the Bulls. A lot of people don't realize he was a coach when Michael Jordan hit that infamous shot over Craig Elo. After Cavs whooped their ass 6 times that season, and now they finally get over the hump in the playoffs to get that done. And in the documentary, I love Doug Collins, bro. Like I've always kind of liked him in the way he saw the game. But this documentary, he was giving himself all the roses and flowers while he could still smell them. He was like, under me, he was MVP. He was Defensive Player of the Year. He was the dunk contest champion. Mm-hmm. All facts. You know what I mean? Right. All facts. And Doug Collins was like, listen, I had just as much to do with this thing as anybody else.
And I think another thing as well too is that Jordan made sure he gave Doug Collins his props.
He did.
I don't think enough had been highlighted about, because we're talking about this period of greatness in which Jordan had won the 3 championships and on. But prior to that, and this is part of the reason why, I don't like to do the revisionist history about the arguments that I have with people about, why I will hands down say that Michael Jordan is the greatest player to play the game. But let's just keep in mind that in that period of when he was with Doug Collins, he did all of those things. And I'm saying, name me a player who will go through those, every single element of what we're talking about right now in this modern NBA. It's not going to be done, right? And unfortunately, because of the analytics and the numbers, it's going to forever change that dynamic that you're going to see a Giannis Antetokounmpo win NBA MVP, Finals MVP, win the Defensive Player of the Year. You know what I'm saying? Like you're not going to see all of those things happen in this modern age. And where there was a period a person could do that, that person should be given his props for that. And the coach who was helping him get to that point, even if it didn't mean that they won a championship. So I just wanted to make sure that that point has been emphasized as well, too, because people just totally overlook the fact that Doug Collins put Michael Jordan on this precipice of greatness that he's on, because remember, Jordan had already had a very stale relationship with how the organization was handling the head coaching, right? And how they was handling head coaches. And he really believed that Doug Collins was a guy that he had found a good relationship with, that was going to back him when he made decisions, and that he could back when the team didn't win. You know what I'm saying? And I think he was teetering on that, oh shit, here we go again, when they got rid of him and then brought in Phil Jackson. Because what was the first thing that Jordan said? Man, I don't want to deal with this triangle nonsense. I want the ball. What do you mean I got to give up the ball? That was Jordan's initial reaction to having Phil Jackson as a head coach.
Yeah, it's true. And so it kind of likens back to something somewhat recently. Remember the Jason Kidd situation, hunting that job in Milwaukee. At least, with Phil, he was already on the coaching staff. Kidd just came out of nowhere and stole that joint, But at the end of the day, this thing that's in the coaching profession, there's supposed to be an unwritten rule. And at the end of the day, I look at things like try to be holistic and honest about them. And some of our greatest heroes or people who we look up to, they've done some grimy things to get to where they're at. It's great that they're here now and they're doing their things, but that was grimy. Phil got into that position kind of in a grimy way, set up and backed by Jerry Krause. But Doug Collins was ultimately a fall guy in a situation, leading that team to the Eastern Conference Finals. And yeah, they didn't get over the hump, but neither did Phil that first year, right? So it took some time, but when they did, man, they went rolling. And, that takes us right into the Bad Boys and the Detroit Pistons and their role in building kind of the brand that is Michael Jordan and what it took to that. So what are your impressions in general?
True to Piston form, they will gladly, accept gratitude for building the Bulls dynasty. They will have no shame in them saying, hey, if it wasn't for us kicking your boys' ass those 2 straight years, you wouldn't have those first 3 championships. You wouldn't have this coming of age. You know what I'm saying? Like this new He-Man out of Chicago. And, basically even John Sally in a very nice way. They're like saying, you're welcome to the Chicago.
Yeah. I mean, and they remain unapologetic for who they are, who they were, and the way they treated Michael in that time, because it got it done, and it got them 2 championships on top of it. So the fact that they were the architects and, Mike Malone's dad, Brendan Malone, created the Jordan rules and all of that, it really did spark Mike and the Bulls to be different if they actually wanted to become champions. And for Jordan to fully feel like he was a part of the elite class of Magic, Larry, and even Isiah Thomas back in those days, he had to overcome just being a great guy who could score and become an ultimate leader and professional. And with that final loss in the Pippen migraine game in Game 7 that summer, it was like a light switch. He's like, no more, like just no mas. We're hitting the weights. I'm on everyone's ass. Go ahead.
I want to interject just one thing real quick before I lose my thought on this. But you can make the argument. And again, this is another reason why I'm just realizing, the greatness of the Bulls, this Bulls team, in a sense. Back then, when a team like the Detroit Pistons, when there is an identity that is built in their DNA, they're coded, and they are accepting of who they are and what they do. They don't run a dynasty for just 2 years and then fade into the sunset. Usually this is like a 4-year run, right? And you can harken back to when the Celtics were doing it, when the Lakers were doing it, okay? And the Pistons were on their way to doing it, okay? They may not have won like uber numbers of championships, but they had constantly been in the Eastern Conference Finals. At that time, the focal point was the Detroit Pistons and the Boston Celtics. And you can make the argument that the Bad Boys had gotten in the way of the Celtics getting opportunities to play for more championships, right? So the fact that the Bulls, in that stretch of the 2 years in which the Pistons, just ran roughshod and then created this new demeanor of Jordan, you can make an argument the Bulls kind of upended that whole, hierarchy of how these teams, like in 2 years, other teams would have been intimidated and they just kept going for another 3 more. The Bulls were like, nah, we're not doing that. In 2 years' time, they were like, yo, after this, we're shutting it down. And that started changing the narrative that if you are not going to be the best of the best, it's a wrap.
Yeah, it's a wrap. True. Yeah, I'll never forget it. Just they came out and, as you lambasted, they gave the Pistons all the smoke after that final, defeat. That 91 team just was like, no, like, no, it's not happening. And they show it. The definitive moments, Rodman pushing Pippen into the stands and Pippen just getting back up like, all right, what's good? And they no longer felt the need to react because they, in essence, knew and felt that they were now superior. They had finally overcome and beating their big brother, so to speak.
And Grant, he's like, little bitches.
Amazing.
That was so. I loved it, man. Yeah. I loved it too because on his T-shirt, you notice on his polo shirt, it said NBA cares. So
yeah, he's a big spokesman for the NBA cares.
Yeah, right, exactly. He truly cared at that moment. He's like, I just want you all to know how much I care about the Detroit Pistons.
But he called it 100. I mean, he called it 100, and like we said earlier on in the intro to this show, that beef still stands. And the way that the Pistons handled it, it just didn't sit right with Mike.
And once again, Isiah Thomas put his foot in his mouth, right? But listen, I mean, I give him all the credit in the world. He's going to keep it 100, right? I mean, in his own right mind, he really and truly believes that what he didn't do was a bitch move, right? Him just walking off the court and not even acknowledging Jordan. And forget that you didn't want to shake hands. The fact that you ducked your head past Michael Jordan and you knew you were doing it.
That's the kicker right there. It was the body language in it. You knew it right then and there that it was foul. You knew it. If you were just walking off and whatever, but the fact you did that little, you know what I mean, that says everything to me that you knew it was shady and it was wrong, especially with the way that they went and congratulated you year after year after you whooped their ass and got rid of them. And, Mike took it on the chin.
Listen, you see how Michael Jordan is sitting like Riddick, like in the third version of Riddick, where he's like sitting on his throne, laid back, like, saying, like he just finished stuffing the Thanksgiving turkey in his stomach. Yeah, I'm still living like a king. And in the moment they bring up Isiah, and the moment they bring up that Eastern Conference Finals, his act, like you should have seen, he went full straight 90-degree, like he was about to. He's like to bring somebody out. He's like to the gallows. Send his ass to the gallows.
Whatever it is, I know it's bullshit. You can show it to me, but I know it's bullshit. And that's just real. Like, there's no love lost there, and they'll get into it. I think it's in the upcoming episode, but they're going to talk about the Dream Team and how Isiah Thomas is conveniently left off of that Dream Team, and a lot of that has to do with Michael Jordan, or at least the perception is that Jordan didn't want him on the team. And hey, if you're going to have a team with all the elite players, Jordan is the elite of the elite and was the elite at the time. And if he didn't want somebody, then so be it, so said. So, that's one of those things that I think just ended up happening. But great introspect and look into the bad boys and how they helped shape the Chicago Bulls. I wanted to get into just a couple of quick hitters on here, just some of the funny stuff, real quick. Catch the thing about the Sniff brothers, talking about Jordan's bodyguards because they quote unquote sniff his jock strap, if you will. Just stuff you cannot get if you're not around a team and in a locker room on a regular basis. And I'm going to close my thing here with Jordan snitching part 2, Scott Burrell out here.
You are keeping a snitching tally.
I'm snitching on the snitch, yo. At the end of the day,
we're going to have to start a snitch list. Okay.
For real.
Hashtag
that's what it should be called.
Snitch list. All right.
Yeah, it's not even the last.
That on Twitter right now.
No.
You keep it up. Listen. It's a good thing you weren't a part of his security detail. Jordan, he would have got ready.
I ain't no snitch, brother. You best believe that. But at the end of the day, like I said, this could be called, the snitching files, because Jordan is telling all, and it's not a tell-all book.
You see how quickly they got a hustle for putting Swaggy P's business out on the streets. Michael Jordan does this nonsense in the 2000s.
In Jordan's defense, it's 30 years later or whatever.
He'd have a show on WeTV by this point, So
yeah, it's trippy. But what are you looking forward to next week, fam? And what will be episodes, I guess 5 and 6 already. Oh my God.
What am I looking forward to?
Yeah.
I think I want to really get more now into where Jordan and Rodman are at now. I thought that it was very interesting that they made it a point to talk about what happened in these episodes with Rodman feeling some kind of way after Jordan got, when Pippen came back.
Mm-hmm.
And I also, be made was about the comments that Jerry Krause made after the All-Star break, right? And on their way to Utah to play the Jazz, who they had just finished beating to get that second championship, right? And them taking that L. And us not believing that that's what really caused, they weren't 100% or weren't completely in the game or anything like that. When I think part of that issue is, again, we don't often talk about it, but the fact when things are printed, when there is things being put out, and print media is still very much a viable commodity at that time, when that stuff is being put out there and it's being consumed by the players who represent your organization and have to go out and play a game, particularly a game that involves a team that you just finished beating in the finals the year previous, let's not act like it's not going to have some kind of effect on them. And I want to now really see how badly Jerry Krause's ego and his ego system consumed that team during the stretch, and how much of Jordan's influence, Jackson's influence, because Pippen is already out of it. Rodman is already out of it. And maybe there may be some other players that will get an opportunity to get some spotlight to shine on what still kept this team together, because it really looks like they're hanging on a thread, even though they're 34-15 at that point in time. So
good stuff for sure. And I think I just want to see how they integrate, maybe even more so, some of the old foes, if you will, that kind of came back to help the team. So we've already seen the kind of the Rodman angle, but again, Ron Harper eventually joins this basketball team at some point. Horace Grant, once a friend, becomes a foe at some point as well too, on the way to championships 4, 5, and 6 for Jordan as well. So there's a lot of different stuff that this documentary can go into. It is really just not the last season of their dynasty. They're going all over the place and telling everyone's backstory. So I think we're in store for a whole lot more. But those are some of the things I'd love to see, man, moving forward into episodes 5 and 6.
All right. Well, listen, this has been a great conversation to be had, and we definitely want to hear from you guys as well, too. I know Shaw's going to start posting up the snitch list, but that can't be the only reason why you were catching us this week. As always, we encourage each and every single one of you guys to hop on board with us, the Baseline NBA podcast. Catch us on Twitter at NBA Baseline.